Hi everyone, Professor Peter Nash from Griffith University in beautiful downtown Brisbane in Australia. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Adam Goldman,
who is an epidemiology researcher at the Chaim Sheba Medical Center in Tel-Hashomer.
Hi Adam, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. We're going to be discussing one of your recent papers and seminars of arthritis and rheumatism, and it's a very topical topic. It's looking at the adverse cardiovascular events
It's in rheumatoid arthritis patients
treated with JAK inhibitors, and its analysis of the post-marketing spontaneous safety reports. So welcome, Adam. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what your interests are and where you work.
Hi, Professor Nash, and thank you for the invitation. I'm working as a physician in the internal medicine department at Sheba Medical Center in Israel, and I'm also a researcher in the epidemiology department at Sheba and Tel-Aviv University. I'm very interested in post-marketing surveillance, pharmacovigilance, and also on the autoimmune diseases and immune suppressive medications.
In our country, the JAKs had one of the biggest uptakes in the world. At one stage, 1 in 3 XIR went straight to a JAK, 1 in 3 TNFIR went straight to a JAK. What is the situation with JAKs in Israel about availability, for example, and has oral surveillance changed things in Israel?
Yes, so I think also in Israel, the JAK inhibitors are becoming more and more common as a potential therapeutic option and become an essential therapeutic option, particularly in RA, but in the recent years also in the IBD. So definitely we see a lot of patients and we see the great efficacy. Many of these patients really get improved with the JAK inhibitors, and the availability is fine, it's okay. Those who need it and they already failed on a previous line with biologics, so they definitely received the treatment.
And did oral surveillance change the landscape? Did it change the prescribing of JAK inhibitors in your country?
Of course, the oral surveillance trial gained a lot of attention from the medical community as well here in Israel. And that was the rationale and the motivation for our study, to understand better the safety outcomes of JAK inhibitors in real-world setting and in a very diverse population. Also, other products, not only tofacitinib, but also Upada and Bari. So that's very, of course, fundamental trial. So was part of our background for this current research.
So tell us a little bit about the FAER system. You can have an idea how much selection bias, how much reporting bias might have been involved in collecting this data. What is the FAER system?
Okay, so in our study, we analyzed the FDA Adverse Event Reporting System, also named FIRES, and that's a global pharmacovigilance program that collects data globally post-marketing after FDA approval. So the system has several limitations and strengths. The strengths is that it is a global system with a really large sample size. So that allows us as researchers to focus also on subpopulation, to study rare adverse events, and to study and to analyze the outcomes also in the real world setting. But of course, there are limitations though. So reporting bias is one of the main biases because this is a spontaneous database. That means that the reports are by the consumers, lawyers, or healthcare providers to the platform, and that's subjected to the reporting bias. Although there are regulations, of course, mandatory reporting of new products and severe adverse events. It is very important to understand that the FIRES do not allow us to calculate the incidence. We don't know the total number of patients exposed to the drugs, but we can calculate relative measures such as the reporting odds ratio, which is the analog to the odds ratio in cohort studies.
There's no way of knowing if the reporting is underreported or overreported. The biologic DMARDs have been around so long, people may not bother reporting anymore.
Yes, definitely. You're pointing out to the Weber effect, which is known since the 1980s, that was described as an increase in the reporting of an adverse event following the first year of approval. Another important reporting bias is the notoriety bias, which is similarly described an increase in the reporting of an adverse event, but after an FDA alert instead of FDA approval. So these two biases are relevant for our study, definitely. Okay, but we tried to mitigate those.
Tell us a bit how you did the study, observational, retrospective pharmacovigilance. How did you do it? What did you look at?
Okay, so we took as a comparator group the DMARDs, which primarily were anti-TNF, but also other biologics. And we studied the reporting of adverse cardiovascular events following recipients of JAK inhibitors compared to the other biologics. And we compared the reporting ratio, and we found an increased reporting following the treatment with JAK inhibitors compared to other BDMARDs. Moreover, we stratified our analysis by the JAK product to understand whether it is a class effect or it is only one of the JAK inhibitors, and we see that the safety signal was consistent among different JAK inhibitors. So we presumed that these adverse effects are class effect, and of course that the different mechanisms are also discussed in our paper. Another things that we have done are stratifying by the age, since the oral surveillance found the most prominent risk for older patients. So in our last analysis, although more reports were after age 65, but the safety signal was consistent, and also in the young patients, they were also at increased risk for reporting of adverse cardiovascular events.
You do have big numbers. You had 75,000 RA patients treated with JAKs,
50,000 on UPA,
2,000 Barry, no filgotinib that's there, 100,000 biologic, mainly TNFs, as you say. They were pretty standard, mainly female. Background rate of steroids a little bit lower than I would have thought, 10%. You did analyze. Was there an increased risk over time, or was it the same risk each year?
Okay, so that's a great question. We studied the reporting over the years. We wanted to see if there are any changes. So we did observe a change after 2019, which is corresponding to the FDA warning. And from 2019 afterward, there was an increase in the reporting, but it was steady throughout the other years following that year. And this trend was observed with both tofacitinib and baricitinib, but not with UPADA, but maybe because UPADA was from the first approved after 2019. Yeah, so that's definitely an important finding in our efforts to analyze whether it is a notoriety bias or Weber effect, which might affect the results. But we see the same trend in both products, baricitinib and tofacitinib.
Okay, so tell us, the VTE was about double the rate for the biologics. What about the other adverse effects like stroke, ischemic heart disease, etc.? MACE, lung cancer, anything?
So we mainly focused on the adverse cardiovascular events, and we see an increased reporting of ischemic heart disease, stroke, and thromboembolic events. Another interesting and novel safety signal was arrhythmias, which are almost not reported in clinical trials and observational studies to date. but they were indeed occurred in several studies after we thoroughly looked at the supplementary and all the materials. So arrhythmias are another novel safety signals which should be further monitored, and we should increase the awareness also and to further study prospectively this potential adverse event.
Did you see any predictors of adverse events like age, diabetes, history of heart disease, smoking, anything?
Unfortunately, in our study, it was a little bit difficult to assess the risk factors because the data is not complete enough. And so we primarily adjusted for the main risk factors, but it was a little bit problem with this method to understand the risk factors.
And did any of those other cardiac events increase over time or very stable each year?
All of them were stable during the years after 2019. The cardiac arrhythmias were stable throughout the entire study period, which is also reasonable because there was no warning about arrhythmias. And the other, as I said, was stable after the 2019. All the three products: PADA, baricitinib, and tofacitinib.
One of the interesting features, the effect of age. Can you stress that again? Over 65, under 65, so that I can understand what effect did it have on the risk?
Yes, so we found that in our study, the increased reporting was consistent among different age groups. Both patients above and under 65 years were at increased risk for reporting adverse cardiovascular events. Absolutely, the numbers are greater among those are older, but relative to the comparator, the safety signal is quite similar.
Okay.
So our conclusion is that both patients, both age groups are at increased risk, but it's most likely that the incidence will be much greater among those that are older.
But your findings are an increased risk against a biologic DMARD, and you don't know what the risk is against the general population and against conventional synthetic DMARDs, yeah?
Yes, well, that's an important point because we took the comparator of biologic DMARDs, which represent roughly a similar patient population. So we also did a sensitivity analysis against the entire database, and it was also statistically significant. But it is important to emphasize that overall, patients that are at a better clinical situation, that the drugs induce remission, it is probably the best thing for the cardiovascular safety profile. Okay, so
I think it's an important point, but we don't know how much underreporting there would be on the biologic side if these drugs have been around a long time and people don't bother to report anymore.
Yes, you're right. Definitely, I agree. The study findings are subjected to the Weber effect, of course, but it is that the Weber effect, as I said, it described since the 1980s that new medications are more reported with regard to their adverse events. But it is important also to note that recent papers who studied this area did not observe the Weber effect in the most recent medications. Okay, so several research did analyze the FDA adverse event reporting system for a Weber effect and did not find that it is confounder of the results. So of course we cannot rule out, but I don't think that this will completely change our findings.
So that's very important, thank you. Did you see a difference in increased risk pre-2019 and post-2019? Because up until 2019, no one would have paid too much attention about the increased vigilance compared to after 2019?
Right, yes. So the reporting was lower before 2019. That's definitely something that we observed in the database. We did not calculate the specific statistical
was that a
measures.
big difference or a small? Big difference or small difference?
Well, it was roughly half the reporting before 2019 per year. Okay. It's not only affected by the warnings, of course, it's affected from other things as well, because the comparator group may also increase in the reporting since there is more awareness for cardiovascular adverse events, for the importance of reporting these events, and for the pharmacovigilance program.
So I think this is critical. The class effect you described is important. We're trying to work out, is this a JAK2 effect or a JAK class effect? I'm interested that the baricitinib numbers here, which are quite small, seem to have the same risk as the other JAKs you're showing.
Yes, exactly. So the main findings till today were about tofacitinib. So tofacitinib is considered a pan-JAK inhibitor. So there weren't expectations that maybe the more specific JAK inhibitors will have a favorable cardiovascular safety profile, because baricitinib is mainly inhibit JAK1 and 2, and Upada mainly JAK1. But in our study, the findings are not consistent with this hypothesis, because we see a similar reporting among different products. As you said, baricitinib has maybe the greater safety signal, although it is more selective.
So UPA had the same rate as TOFA?
Well, they were roughly all the same. We did not find significant difference between them, but we find that all of them and each one of them is statistically significant when compared to the biologics DMARDs.
What do you plan to do next?
So our study group is very dedicated to the post-marketing surveillance, and we are studying right now several research projects of autoimmune diseases with focus on the immunosuppressive medications and their safety endpoints. We study several rare adverse events that were rarely reported in the literature till now, of new immunosuppressive medications and small molecules. So there is a lot of work to do. Stay tuned.
And your take-home message for the clinician is?
So our take-home message is definitely not to limit the use of JAK inhibitors, but to do it with greater knowledge and evidence-based. So pre-treatment assessment of the cardiovascular system, risk reduction, risk factors reduction, whether it will be with pharmacological treatments or with recommendation of lifestyle changing. And during the treatment, also cardiovascular surveillance and increased awareness when the relevant symptoms appear.
So you've taught us an important lesson. This paper is more hypothesis generating than definitive, but it appears as a class effect rather than a JAK2 effect. Age seemed to matter less in your study than oral surveillance would suggest over 65.
We should not ignore tachyarrhythmias as one of the cardiovascular events, this you have shown. And we have to understand that the issues of the Weber effect, the notoriety bias with any pharmacovigilance study, and that the biologic comparators have been around for decades, So reporting would have dropped off with those, and this can make the numbers look the way they look.
But quite interesting, and we appreciate your time. We know you're on call and very busy. To thank you again for your time, Adam. If you'd like to know more about this paper and others uploaded to the Immune-Mediated Inflammatory Disease Forum website, you can get detailed slide sets available at imidforum.com. Please subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or other. Let us know what you think. You can watch us on IMID Forum on YouTube, and you can follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook to keep up with all the latest disease content in this area coming soon in 2024. Thank you so much, Adam. We look forward to more of your work in this area.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks.